I'm so glad that you're here. Let's have some fun. This afternoon, I want to tell you a modern-day fairy tale. Modern-day fairy tale that includes a hapless hero, complacency, dragons, and dreams coming true. Once upon a time, the words that I was reading in the book to Eli were familiar. There was a hapless hero whose life was about to be disturbed by a disgruntled dragon. Dad, I wish dragons were real. Well, I don't know, Eli, that's a little intense. And Dad, if dragons were ever to attack you, I would save you. Well, thanks, Eli. You'll be the first person I call whenever I see a dragon. The story goes on to tell us how the hero is able to summon the courage at the very last minute to fight that fire-breathing winged reptile and saves the village at the very last moment. Eli and I breathed a collective sigh of relief as we closed the book. And then, like every night, I told him that I loved him, kissed him goodnight, and I went to my laptop to surf Reddit. But I was thinking about what Eli had said, something about slaying dragons. It made me think of the men and the women who have slayed dragons. It made me think of Martin Luther King Jr., who so famously said that until a man has discovered something he's willing to die for, he isn't fit to live. The man gave his life to a cause. The man had dragons. And I thought of my grandfather and his friends, soldiers of World War II. I have a friend, Sam. He once wisely observed that modern America is built on the backs of the men of World War II. He returned from war having been shot at and survived. Nothing will make a man braver than having been shot at and survived. Those men had dragons. And I saw the bookshelf, and it made me think of J.K. Rowling, who 7 years out of university, before writing Harry Potter, saw herself as the biggest failure she knew. She had a marriage that just failed. She was jobless with a dependent child. She was clinically depressed and had considered suicide. And now, she's written the most successful series of children's books known to man and could quite possibly be richer than the queen. The woman had dragons. So there I am, surfing Reddit, thinking about Martin Luther King and soldiers and J.K. Rowling, and I realized that I'd stopped fighting dragons. No, I'm the comfortable guy as a real estate agent living in somewhere Ohio. I saw cows on a daily basis, but not dragons. So I decided to do something about it, and I grabbed my phone and I called my buddy Baker and I said, let's do that movie. Because you see, as a child, it was always my dream to be involved in the movies. I'd thought often about moving to Hollywood and becoming a professional filmmaker. But then as an adult, fear, those little rational voices in the back of your head, they'd always stop me from doing it. No, I decided that pursuing the dream of being a filmmaker was just too scary. So I went into real estate. And I built the quintessential American life. You know, the one that has a path. Go to school, get good grades, go to college. Get a job, get a wife, get a house, dog, 1.5 kids, minivan. And despite all that abundance, something was missing. At the time, I felt terribly guilty even admitting that. But I'd awakened. I'd awakened to the idea that I was complacent. And not the sit on the couch, eat Fritos, and watch Honey Boo Boo kind of complacency, right? The kind of complacency that had outsourced the tough decisions in life to society's expectation of me. And so that's why I called my buddy Baker. You see, somewhere between childhood and growing to be an adult, I'd lost the desire to fight dragons. And I submit to you that if you want to fight complacency, you need a dragon in your life, something you are willing and passionate to fight for. So I said, Baker, let's do that movie. Because I've shelved my dream of being a filmmaker for 15 years, but now's the time to do something about it. Now, we didn't have the experience. We didn't have the money, but we had the passion. And so, we grabbed a crew of like-minded friends. We jumped in a van and we crisscrossed the country, drove 10,000 miles interviewing dozens of people about this very topic, complacency. Why is it that we're so willing to trade our dreams for a scripted life? And on our journey, we learned several things. The most common lie that Americans tell, I'm fine. We tell it to one another, but more importantly, all too often, we tell it to ourselves. I learned that complacency is a team sport. People love complacent friends. If you're looking for the number one action item that you can take and you ask Baker, how do I fight complacency? Baker's going to say, you need to change the 5 people you're spending most time with. And for most people, man, that's difficult. And I am not going to tell you that fighting complacency is easy. Just important. Also, complacency is a choice. If you ask me what's the number one thing you can do to fight complacency, I'm going to tell you take action. Because in taking action, by the very definition of the world, you've eradicated complacency. I've learned that it's in the epic quest that we go from I'm fine to I'm friggin' great. How about you? We met remarkable people, inspiring people. Matt and Betsy. Matt and Betsy were living in the curse of sevens. Betsy was a school counselor. Matt was in IT. Neither of them had come to those professions by passion. Life was good, a 7 out of 10, but it wasn't great. And neither of them had the courage to reach for a 10 for fear that they would miss, landed a 2. Something switched inside of Matt. They caught a deep vision for what life could be for them if they were to follow their passions of DIY naturals and organic foods. And every night over dinner, he would say to Betsy, let's make a radical change. Betsy knew what that meant. But to his surprise, one night she said, all right, I'm in. So they quit their jobs, which forced them to short sale their home. And they moved to Asheville, North Carolina. And now they pursue their passions of DIY naturals and organic foods. And I'm happy to report that they are currently living happily ever after. And we met Jonathan. Jonathan was forced with the decision. Does he go into physical therapy? Does he go into law? His girlfriend's dad reminded him, even a bad attorney makes 6 figures. Jonathan's law career came at quite a price. He put himself directly in the ER. He wanted to make a radical change and do something that was good for his health, and so he decided he'd start a yoga studio. Started looking for property. Found the ideal spot, too. Downtown Manhattan. He describes it, his words, looked like a burnout crack den. But it had potential. And he signed a lease on that property. September 10th, 2001. Talk about a dragon. Jonathan turned that yoga studio into one of the most successful East Coast yoga studios seen. And perhaps my favorite family were the Commodores. Joe and Yvette. They have 6 kids. And Joe had a very successful corporate job. Took him on the road 5-6 days a week. While he's out climbing the corporate ladder, he's missing out on the lives of his family. So he and Yvette came up with a very creative answer. They took out a pizza box and a pen. They bought a used van, a used bus, as it were. A used school bus. And they turned it into a house on wheels. Yeah, and moved to Wyoming. But the Commodore kids are among the most happy children I've ever met in my life. And in case you're wondering, Joe will tell you, you can get a bus for $1,500. They're a dime a dozen if you look in the right places. Thought of which scares my wife to death. Matt and Betsy, Jonathan, the Commodores. We met each of these remarkable people while we were filming the documentary. They all took on the dragon, complacency, and they won. There's a little more to the story. And this is the point where I become a protagonist in a Walt Disney movie. You know the one. Wish Upon a Star. The powerful thing is that as an adult, you hold the pen to that fairy tale. A little over a year ago, I was a realtor in suburban Ohio. Had never made a movie, but I took on the dragon And 6 months later, we'd made a documentary. But the really exciting part is that as a result of that, I received an invitation, and now I'm employed by an Emmy award-winning film studio. And fast forward to today, just last week, 425 days after that historic phone call to Adam, I got another phone call. And instead of me saying, let's make the movie, the voice on the other end said, Grant, that work we did in the fall for CBS, it was just nominated for an Emmy. Consider that dragon slain. Dreams can come true. Benjamin Franklin said that most men die at 25 and aren't buried until 75. Don't let that be you. Take up arms. Take up arms against the most imaginative dragon that you can come up with. Reconnect with that childhood heart, the heart that was willing and eager to fight the dragons. Because now I have a much better answer for my son. Tonight, after we've read the book, and I turn to Eli, and I say,
Dad, I wish dragons were real.
oh, buddy, dragons are real. It's just that the adults have stopped looking and they're not willing to fight anymore.
What about you, Dad?
Sir Eli, there is nothing that I would rather do than to spend my life fighting dragons along your side. Let's go kick some fire-breathing tail.